Hi, this is Adam Eliyahu Berkowitz coming at you live from the Golan for Israel 365 News. I have a very special guest today. He's a friend, Avi Abelow. He's the executive officer of the Pulse of Israel and IsraelUnwired.com. And I know that everyone thinks that in Israel we're all fighters, but these days the real battleground is exactly what we're on right now. It's the internet, social media. It's the battleground, and it's being fiercely fought. Avi is definitely one of the people fighting to keep the airwaves open, and he's suffered for it. So Avi, I'd like to talk to you. First of all, could you tell me, does cancel culture exist, or is it a boogeyman that people who just want to scream made up?
Well, first of all, Elio, thank you so much for having me on your show. Last time I had you on my show, so it's amazing to. No, that's fine. No,
I forgot.
By the way,
I forgot.
Great video interview with Adam Elio Berkowitz. Unbelievable story. So yeah, everyone has to watch that as well. But no, thank you so much. Pleasure being here. Is cancel culture real? Well, the very easy way to explain how real cancel culture is.
Can I interrupt you, Avi?
Yeah, please.
There might be people here that don't know what that term means. Can you just define what cancel culture is, please?
Cancel culture is the culture of canceling people's voices and literally canceling their accounts, removing them from platforms. And again, the best way to show you how real cancel culture is it's not just happening for people, for individuals, but it's happening for platforms, for websites, for applications. The biggest modern example was just a month or two ago, the social media platform called Parler, which was known to be a place where more conservative, right-wing Trump supporters were flocking to after leaving the huge censorship they were incurring on Facebook. And not only did the Apple Store remove the Parler app from its phone, so if you basically had an iPhone, you couldn't use it or download it anymore. Not only did the Google App Store remove it from their application store, so if you had a Android phone, you couldn't have it anymore. But the server company, I think it was Amazon, removed the whole platform, the whole website, the whole application from its servers. So they basically shut down a whole company that was servicing millions and millions of people who did not have a home anymore on Facebook. So it is a total ideological war taking place where big tech, Google, Apple, Amazon, three of the biggest tech titans, you can't exist on the internet without being connected to one of those in one way, shape, or form. And they're canceling, they're literally shutting down voices and platforms. So yeah, it exists.
I want to point out, if I may, the backstory to that whole thing was the example of Parler is amazing because what was happening was right-wing conservative posts were being censored and suppressed on the social media, Facebook, Google, Twitter. To a horrifying degree, the fact that New York Post, the fourth largest media in America, the fourth largest newspaper in America, got locked out of its Twitter account. The fourth largest newspaper.
For posting and writing a true investigative article about Hunter Biden's laptop that the whole mainstream media hid until after the elections, and then they started talking about it, even then only to a low degree.
And then what happened was when people were complaining, and even the Senate and Congress were getting interested in what was going on here, that right-wing and conservative viewpoints were being suppressed. The response was, well, if you don't like it, it's a private company, go somewhere else. So yes, there was a private company, and they were becoming hugely popular. Parler was, I think it was even the #1 download from the Google App Store. Yeah. And that's when they got shut down, when they were on top.
Right.
And that's like saying, it's like, go somewhere else. Oh, you went somewhere else. Oh, there's a lot of you. Oh, we can't let that happen.
Yeah.
So the suppression is not on a small scale, and it's not subtle or hidden. It's in your face, and it's on a huge scale. So
Right.
that's
So let me walk you backwards. Let me walk you backwards because where we are today is no surprise to me, and I'll explain to you why. First of all, walking you backwards, a number of years ago, I had a website called IsraelVideoNetwork.com. It was hugely popular. Hugely popular.
I remember it. I loved it.
Right. We were one of the top 10 websites in the whole Jewish Israel space. How do I know? Because like a business, we follow the statistics of our website and traffic and everything. And we were consistently up one of the top 10 websites in the whole Jewish Israel space. Okay. We're talking about millions and millions of page views and video views a month. And basically Facebook and Google destroyed us. It no longer exists. That website doesn't exist anymore. We had to reincarnate ourselves as a whole new website. All right. And again, yes, Facebook and Google made algorithm changes. Yes. But even without those algorithm changes, we were totally destroyed on an ideological basis. How do I know? Because again, you can go into the back ends of Google and you could find out where they're removing Google ads from. We were able to go into the back end of Facebook and see when they were removing our posts from their back end, because Facebook also, we were using a back end with Facebook, and everything was ideological. They didn't say, oh, ideological, but they had their own messaging that basically they basically did not agree with those content. They didn't want their advertising to be associated with it. So we were basically taken down on a huge level, if not totally, but because of cancel culture. And this is a number of years ago.
So, Avi, if I can, this is exactly why I wanted to talk to you. What were you putting up there that they felt that had to be taken down? Were you putting up calls to violence? Were you putting up lies? Were you putting up propaganda? What were you putting up that they felt had to be removed?
Listen, at the time, the major battle for consciousness, for awareness, was against ISIS and the growing Islamic terrorism taking over the world. It was happening almost every week in Europe. It was happening, terrorist attacks in America. So I'm unabashedly pro-life and giving out information to know about what the dangers are there in our lives that unfortunately the mass media and many governments who are politically correct hide from the public. So in standing up for Israel is also calling out the evil of terrorism within the Islamic world. I don't call every Muslim a terrorist. I don't say it's all Muslims, but there is a cancer within that world that unfortunately political correctness does not allow any media to talk about. So we went there. We were calling out the terror of Islamic terrorism taking place not only in Israel and the Middle East. Again, we're very, very vocal, saying the biggest victims of Islamic terrorism are Muslims themselves. More Muslims are killed by Islamic terrorism than anyone else in the whole world. And also, so it was basically mostly all of that, all of those type of posts dealing with that and the terror attacks taking place around the world at the hands of Islamic terrorism. But it's not just that, because going to the beginning, the first time we were canceled, the first time we experienced censorship was back in 2015. Okay, people to think, oh my God, now it's happening. Well, I was talking about this since 2015 because we had a post on our Israel Video Network page. At the time was around 500,000 Facebook followers, like a very, very large page. And the post was, it's called Israel, not Palestine. And it was actually a post made like 2-3 years earlier. It was just like a nice graphic post. And we got a message from Facebook that post was removed. But not only was the post removed, they disabled our page of 500,000 followers. This is back in 2015. Okay, so again, to make a long story short, we ended up fighting it. You have to use politics. We ended up fighting it. We got the page back up. But we were already experiencing censorship, and this has nothing to do with terrorism, nothing to do with violence. This has to do, and it's not a person. This has to do with the fact that if you have enough people out there complaining and sending in reports, well, the algorithm can automatically click whatever, so that posts get removed or pages get shut down, something like that.
If I may, just to show you that it sounds crazy that someone who would be talking against ISIS, against terrorism, would be suppressed, censored, removed. They say it's because you're a hate group. One of the biggest offenders in this area is the Southern Poverty Law Center, which touts itself as a law center that champions the underdog. And at one time that might have been true, but they're big money. They have big money behind them. They have a list of hate groups. So the question is, I mean, some of them are very clearly hate groups. The Ku Klux Klan is on it, and any organization connected to it, neo-Nazis, white nationalists, racist skinheads. But in this list, they unabashedly say that Christian identity groups are hate groups.
I think also pro-life, even pro-life in terms of abortion rights.
Pro-life, because and because they're for
not abortion rights, against abortion. Pro-life, against abortion rights.
Anyone who is anti-LGB and anti homosexuality, anti same-sex marriages, they are listed as a hate group by the Southern Poverty Law Center. Fortunately, they also have anyone who denies the Holocaust, though I'm sure they come into a little contradiction where there's some people who deny the Holocaust but are also whatever. But for example, anyone who objects to the two-state solution is listed as anti-Muslim.
Really?
Yeah, sure. The list of groups who are anti-Muslim, it goes on and on forever. It's
I think Elio and Avi, you're being too kind to the big tech, because you're assuming that it is the algorithms that are to blame for taking these down.
Not at all. Let me. I was starting the history, right? I started from the recent history. Let me go all the way back. Okay. So I basically explained how today cancel culture. Today, so people understand, cancel culture. People's accounts are being removed by Twitter, by Facebook. Pages are being taken down. Again, the Southern Poverty Law Center, if I'm not mistaken, is one, if not the major fact checker of Facebook. They are looked at as the authority when to punish people for what they're writing. So that's what's taking place now. It is deep ingrained. Cancel culture is happening big time. Then I gave the example of our website a few years ago, destroyed, demolished, and we had to rebuild from scratch. Then I went back to 2015.
Years of work.
Right?
Years of work. Come on.
And then I went back to 2015, showing that post and every once in a while we'd have posts removed, right? That would happen, but that was the first time it happened in 2015. Now I'm going to take you back to the beginning. The beginning is when my partner and I, Avi Abelow, set up our business, Israel Video Network, in 2011. When we set it up, and again, that was in the beginning of the heyday of Facebook, right? I explained to him, because it was just the two of us starting a business from scratch, a website from scratch, no email addresses, nothing, zero. We were starting a business totally. And I told him, Avi, we are going to ride the wave of social media. We're going to grow it as much as possible, but our methodology is going to be build up and be as independent as possible, because the day is going to come sooner than we think that our voices are going to be canceled out and shut down by big tech. It was clear to me in 2011 that day would come. I understood that social media was finally allowing non-mainstream mainstream media voices to have a platform. But the day would come when, and I didn't know how it would come or why. I was thinking it would be because oil money would infiltrate the boardrooms of Google and Facebook and Twitter, and that would possibly be the reason that they then censor pro-Israel, pro-Jewish voices. But I didn't know how, but I knew it would happen. So I was never surprised when it started, and I'm not surprised of today. Anyone who studies the left understands the left is about control. It's not about freedom. It's not about rights. It's not about equality. It's about the abuse and misuse of people's innocence and wonderful values to basically take control and shut down anyone that they disagree with. And that is basically what we are witnessing happening in real time in a very scary way today.
You said this was happening around 2015 for you?
Yeah, it's the first time it happened.
It was the lead up to the election.
Right. Right. And the connection to it's a good thing you brought up the election, because I became extremely vocal after the election. Why did I become extremely vocal after the election? Anyone who was listening to social media at the time, or listening to big tech, you actually listened to what Zuckerberg and Facebook executives were saying after the 2016 election, right? After Trump won, the whole big tech world, the Googles, the Facebooks, they were all basically doing what we say in Hebrew, al-khait. They were all saying, woe is me, it's our fault. It's because of us that we allowed fake news to be spread, that then the American people voted for Trump. And that's when they started developing the processes and tweaking their algorithms to fight what they called fake news. And it wasn't about fighting fake news. They said it right then. You can go to the videotapes and you could find them, or I could find them and send them to you. They were saying, we have to make the changes to not allow Trump to be elected again in the next election. That was their ideological stance as corporations for their companies as a takeaway after the Trump election of 2016. And I basically called it. It was the Trump censorship program, because they just needed to censor and put in the algorithms and make it sound like it all made sense in order to shut down the a possibility of those voices growing on their platforms.
Which, as we know, led to eventually them removing President Trump completely from social media, which is just outrageous that they can decide to remove a sitting president from the media. But that's the world that we're living in.
At the same time that the Ayatollah Khomeini was allowed to be on Twitter and say death to Israel and all kinds of
death to America.
The hypocrisy is obvious. We see that. I don't know if you're following right now as we speak, the ICC, which Rav Nachman Kahana is fond of calling the International Court of Criminals. This court has just said that they are going to prosecute Israel for war crimes for what's happening in Judea, Samaria, and Gaza. So the hypocrisy, and this is coming from an African head of the court, who we know that Africa is very keen on human rights. So the hypocrisy is just spilling over for those that want to see it. Unfortunately, so many people, their ideology gets in the way. And the truth is that the freedom of speech, the right to freedom of speech, is something that should not be denied regardless of what your position is. So really someone who is a true liberal and really believes that one has the right to speak, they should be the ones that the first. I remember there's a famous debate that happened years ago between Rabbi Meir Kahana and Alan Dershowitz, and it was very, very strongly protested, and they tried to have it shut down. And Alan Dershowitz started off the debate by saying that I will be the first one to fight for the rights of Meir Kahana to speak, even though I disagree with what he has to say, because I believe in that right. And any liberal that's a true liberal should have that position, that they are willing, even if they completely disagree with you, they're willing to allow you to speak.
Yeah, listen, Dennis Prager says it best when he says liberalism is totally different from today's leftism. And any true liberals are, they can't necessarily be voting for the Democratic Party anymore, because the leadership, at least the leadership of the Democratic Party, not every Democrat, there are plenty of good Democrats, but the Democratic leadership has basically taken the leftism of supporting the shutting down of free speech and calling every Trump supporter a potential domestic terrorist and politicizing all of American institutions to go after domestic terrorism,
which is half the country.
Which is half the country. Is like, what's going on here? It makes no sense.
If I may, I want to point out that it's interesting that the fight is at a time when the ability to express yourself and get your words and your opinions out into the world in an unprecedented way via the internet. That's specifically the time that it is so difficult that the dark side, the evil people, are battling against that. And I think it's interesting. We're coming up on Pesach. And as you guys know, the whole point of Pesach literally means in Hebrew, Pesach, the mouth that speaks, because the redemption begins when you call for it. It begins through the power of speech. And when Israel cried out to God, that's when he said, okay, you're crying out to me, you're calling out to me, you're talking. Well, now it's time to act, and now is when the redemption begins. And I think it's knowing this, the dark side is trying to silence us, because one man opening his mouth and crying out can bring down God's righteous fury on Pharaoh. So I think that's why they're trying to stop us from speaking, which is why I think, Avi, what you're saying, and I'd like to empirically show it, and I'm sure it wouldn't be too difficult, that the speech that is being suppressed is pro-Israel speech. Which is crazy, because you would think that saying something for Israel, the worst you could say, it's a political agenda I don't agree with. But to come down on it and try to entirely suppress it is, and I also want to say that as a journalist, the language is so slanted, so biased, I can't even read even good news sources anymore. They're just so difficult. I'll give you one example. When the media uses the term the Temple Mount, the third holiest site in Islam, and a flashpoint, every single word in that sentence is a lie. Okay, except for
the Temple Mount.
Exactly. I mean, you would think it's an oxymoron. The Temple Mount, holy to Islam. Wait, that doesn't make sense. If it's the Temple Mount, it's the Temple Mount because the Jewish temple was there. Why would it be holy to Islam? Okay, but it doesn't have to make sense.
I remember in grad school being taught that by one of my professors that the Holy Roman Empire was not holy, was not Roman, it was not an empire. But besides that, everything else is correct. It's interesting that we live in a world. I was just thinking. It says in the verse says Ki mitzion teitzei Torah u'dvar Hashem Yerushalayim, that the truth will come out of Jerusalem. And it also, the verses very clearly speak about in the end of days how the world is going to come, all the nations that are come to war in Jerusalem, they're coming against Jerusalem. And I'm just wondering to myself, perhaps that war is just an analogy, that it doesn't mean actual with spears or swords, but actually with this cancel culture that we're speaking about, trying to silence the truth that is coming out of Israel.
Yeah, no, it's 100%. The way I see it is we're the canary, like everything, we're the canary in the coal mine. The Jewish people, Israel as the Jewish state, so we represent the Jewish people. We are the canary in the coal mine. And again, when I set out my business methodology in 2011 with my partner, and I was calling it out, we would be hit first because we're pro-Israel. But it only starts with us being pro-Israel, and then it goes after everyone. Listen, one of the biggest voices, one of the first major names who was canceled in this cancel culture removed by all the platforms, is a Jewish woman, actually, by the name of Laura Loomer. She actually ran for Congress just in the recent elections. She did not win. She just filed to run again, 2022. But she worked for an organization called Project Veritas, undercover investigations, calling out the politicians, calling out Ilhan Omar's and Rashida Tlaib's, and confronting them, the Nancy Pelosi's.
Someday when I write my book, I'll explain how I was involved with that project. I was actually went undercover once in the early days, but
oh wow, amazing!
Not for now.
So she was removed from Facebook. She was removed from Twitter. Not only that, she was removed from Uber. She couldn't use an Uber or order food from Uber anymore. Or what are the other app stores? Her bank canceled her bank account. It's like, and this is like 2 years ago already, and she was saying
a movie like that, Born Identity or
Born Identity. Wow, yeah. You're basically seeing the movies come to life, unfortunately. But she was calling it out, and it had nothing to do with her. It didn't have to do with her being Jewish. It was because she was a conservative. But she was saying, folks, if you don't stand up against it happening to me, it's going to happen to you. And she was very vocal and very bitter that even the conservative world, the mainstream conservative world in America, they didn't give her a voice. Because in a sense, when you're canceled by the big tech world, or at least in the beginning, you're using Jewish language, you're muktzah, you're treif, you're an outsider. So no one mainstream wants to hurt their brand by being associated with you. And she was very bitter that even the whole conservative world, most of the conservative world, very much would not invite her to speak about what she was experiencing. And her message is, if you don't let me speak about what's happening to me, it's going to happen to you. And today, that's exactly what she's saying. I mean, not necessarily did this happen to every mainstream conservative, but it's happening to a lot of conservatives on Facebook.
And for those that don't know, Israel 365 News was actually banned from the social media for a while. And there's definitely that fear in the air that if we, say the wrong word or make the wrong move, that we're going to be banned and they're going to close down our industry. And that's why we encourage everybody to sign up to our newsletter at Israel365news.com. And I know that you do the same, Avi, that you encourage people to join your newsletter, because to have the email lists is really to have the power in your own hands and not to give it over to third parties and to the big tech.
Right.
Join the resistance. Join the resistance.
And that was actually the business strategy that I developed already when we set up the business in 2011. When I was saying, let's ride the wave, let's grow as best as possible. Like, I'm a guy, I believe in gratitude. Hakarat hatov, right? I thank Mark Zuckerberg. Thank you. You helped me grow to be a tremendous email list and platform that I would have never had the opportunity to grow without Facebook. So thank you, Mark. I hate what you're doing now, but that's not going to negate my understanding and appreciation for what I was allowed to accomplish using his platform. But at the time, I basically said, what's our strategy? And this is the business strategy. I was doing business consulting, social media consulting for a lot of different individuals and organizations. And the strategy was, set up a Facebook page, let's grow it, but don't grow it to get people just to like your page. Grow it to grow your email list, because the email list is the only thing that you have to own independently, because one day they're going to change the rules, and they've always changed the rules. And when they change the rules, you're going to be left with nothing if you don't build up your own email list. And have you
seen The Social Dilemma?
The movie? No, I didn't see it yet.
So it's on Netflix. It's a documentary, and I highly recommend it to everybody to watch it. They're basically the big tech executives, many of them that left big tech, and they're basically coming out and explaining how dangerous big tech is. That originally it was founded with these ideals that we're going to bring everybody together, and we're going to bring one world together and allow everybody to communicate with each other freely. And eventually, it turned into something which it turned into a monster, in which the whole goal was just to make more and more money, and throw all the ideals out the window. So it doesn't really matter what the free speech was gone, and we're being controlled basically by social media, and people are able to pay. There are corporations, there are organizations out there that have lots and lots of very deep pockets, and they're able to put lots of money into social media, so much so that they're basically guaranteed that if they put in enough money, they will basically be able to convince the whole population, we're talking about hundreds of millions of people, to change their views. Now, we're not going to change it drastically overnight. It's not going to be from being pro-life to be pro-choice or anything like that, to pro-gun to be anti-gun. But slowly but surely, you can slowly move that over and over, and change people's opinions in mass. And it's something that's very, very powerful, and it's unfortunately become very, very evil.
If I could comment on that, Josh, and when you were talking about Laura Loomer, Project Veritas, they would go undercover into these organizations and film them. And they would come out with a video of people saying, "Oh yeah, we've been working really hard to get Trump out of office. We've been working really," and then they would take down Project Veritas. They would take down the video. They would, and what this is, if I may, this is going to sound like a stretch, but I don't think it is. This is idolatry. This is paganism. This is idolatry fighting truth. Why? Idolatry, you take this little stone voodoo guy, you put him up on the stage, and you say, "This created the world. This hunk of rock created the world. Do you believe it?" And everyone would go, "Do you believe it? Okay, I believe it." Okay, it's a crazy belief. And the thing is, you get people to believe the craziest things. They start, I get into dialogues. People are just repeating the rhetoric that they've been told to repeat.
Right.
And it's a false belief. It is which is idolatry. It is a false belief, a belief in something that doesn't make sense. It's a rejection of truth. Thank God. Hi, Alex. Thank God we have history that's written, that we have to write, that we read every single week, 3 times a week. In the synagogue, we read the Torah, we read the Bible. You want to read history? Look at the prophets, look at the writings, okay? If that's not enough for you, well, we have also the oral Torah. But these are words that have been written, and they aren't changed, and we argue about it, and we read it and interpret it and sift through it to get every grain of truth we can out of it. And here come these people. Go try to find what they told you last week. It's gone. It has no real legs. It has no existence.
I'll go
it's
even
an
further
idolatrous
than that.
belief.
But building upon the thinking you're going on. Listen, we all know it's the victors who write the history books. So the question is, who's going to be the victor, right? And I'm bullish about the Jewish people. Again, in every generation, we lose a few because unfortunately there are Jews who believe in not wanting to believe in their authentic Jewish identity or the Torah, and every generation we unfortunately lose some. That's going to happen in this generation also. But big picture, all Jews who are connected to the Torah, connected to the Bible, connected to their authentic Jewish identity in one way, shape, or form, regardless of how religious they are, they're going to be okay. I'm worried about America and Americans because what's going on? Basically, instead of the 1716 project that was supposed to be rolled out to American educational institutions and schools to be instilled with patriotism of what America, the foundation that America was developed upon, and the pride in being an American and what America is really about. You have the Biden administration pushing a New York Times project called the 1619 Project, which is all about how the beginning of America did not start in 1716. Rather, it started in 1619, which is when the first slaves were brought from Africa, right? That is the history they are going to be pushing in public schools and even private schools, those that accept this curriculum throughout America. So you're going to having kids grow up in America thinking that America was born in sin, and the whole story of America is racism and slavery, et cetera, et cetera. And you don't have to go back to 1619. In terms of modern history right now, I think I just read a headline today that the Biden administration wants to set up a special Memorial Day for January 6th to be like 9/11. because you had a domestic terrorist attack on the Capitol building that they want. Again, that's what the Biden administration is saying. That's what the mass media is telling American people.
bad as the Rwandan genocide.
Right. So that's what
unbelievable.
Mainstream media pushing out to the right, rewriting the history of what they're not even waiting 400 years. They're waiting 2 months, and they're already rewriting history to have an actual Memorial Day for an event that never took place. Because
if you can have a reporter standing there on screen in front of burning buildings while people are throwing bricks at him and say, "Oh no, this is peaceful," and people accept it, it is idolatry. It is getting people to accept a false belief that is absolutely anti-truth.
Do you remember the Minister of Information, the Iraqi Minister of Information, during the Gulf War, as the tanks were coming, the American tanks are right behind him. You can see him in the picture. And he's saying, there's nothing happening here. The Americans aren't here. And you can see the tanks rolling right behind him as he's saying this.
But it started here in Israel. Why? And of course, it's because, people, we have the Bible. And it's all written down. And even people who aren't Jewish, Christians, whatever, they read the Bible, they know the stories, and then they come along and they say, "Oh no, before everyone there was the Palestinians," and people are like, "Oh yes, before everyone, it's really their land. It was occupied. When was it occupied? Where was I when that happened?" So this whole point of
Arabs who came at the end of the 19th century, the beginning of the 20th century, with no history of the land, they were here thousands of years ago.
Right. I mean, if I start, I'll never stop, and then I'll be in a really bad space.
Your point is correct. We are the catalyst of true news, if you want to say that. So in a sense, meaning we were always an issue even before this fake news came about. Again, why were we vocal and pro-Israel activists in the media already in the beginning of the 2000s when social media just started? I mean, again, I was one of the first people to sign up for Twitter when there was no one there. Nothing was going on. Like, I remember I was there for like a year or two. There was nothing. No one was doing anything on Twitter. You had to wait around till it started. But because I saw, oh my God, all of a sudden I have an opportunity to have a platform for a voice of the truth of the Jewish people in the land of Israel, to battle the fake news of the mainstream media that has been going on for decades. Not a year, not two, but fake news, anti-Israel agenda for decades across the whole mainstream media. And finally, we have a voice. So in a sense, our lesson to people is we are the example to be critical of what you hear and read everywhere. Not just because of what's happening now, but because of all the fake news we've had to endure lying about Israel and the Jewish people through the media for decades. So look and be inspired by the Jews who try to stand up for the truth about the true story of the Jewish people, the true story about modern history, Israeli history, the true story of what's going on today in the land of Israel, and to be critical of the headlines and what mass media is telling you. So too, learn from that about everything, about what you're reading that happened in the Capitol on January 6th, about what you're reading about how Joe Biden is wonderful because he does nothing, yet President Trump is horrible even though he did amazing things, but they're not telling you about them because he's horrible. So everything, every issue, a person has to have critical thinking and not just believe what he's told because it was in the news.
I was invited to speak a couple of years ago at a very liberal educational institution here, and the only reason they invited me in the first place is because they had before me a woman, an Arab woman who lived in East Jerusalem, and to tell what it's like to live under occupation. And then someone complained and said, maybe we should hear a Jewish view of this also. So they decided to invite me. That I was never invited back again. But they decided to invite me to basically refute, not to debate her, but to have the other side represented. So the teacher of the class, after hearing this woman speak, and I came a little bit early just to hear what she had to say, didn't interrupt. But afterwards, she leaves, and he gets up to introduce me, and he says, We just heard one truth, and now we are going to hear another truth.
Already a failed educator.
And I got up and I said, you know what, I was going to start differently, but since you introduced me that way, I have to address what you just said. I said, when I was growing up many, many decades ago, and we had a question. So what would we do with that question? If we didn't know the answer, we would go to these buildings. They used to be called libraries. And we would enter these hollowed buildings. They would ask these professionals that worked in these buildings, called librarians, that we were researching a certain subject and we needed the answer to our question. And they would channel us. They would help us find the true answers, what were considered to be reputable answers to the question. Today, what do people do? They have a question. What does everybody do? They go on to their Google and see what Rabbi Mr. Dr. Google has to say about their question. And what winds up happening is, since there's nobody basically deciding what's going to pop up, is there's going to be a website. For example, I said, you can ask the question, did the Holocaust actually happen? And you'll find websites that'll say it did, and you'll find other websites that say that it didn't. And it could very well be that the websites that say that it didn't happen look nicer and more professional than the ones that say that it did. So who's to know what the truth is? Everything's true. I said, that having been said, I believe that there is such a thing as an absolute truth. Not everything is true. There is true and there is false. And what you just heard was false, and what you're about to hear is true. Now, I think I was got into more trouble saying that I had the chutzpah to suggest that not only is there an absolute truth, but that I may actually know this, that I suggest that I know the absolute truth. They couldn't handle that, and they just melted down at that point. But I can tell you that, unfortunately, today in the world of internet that we live, a whole generation of people, of kids, are growing up having no idea what the truth is. It's very, very sad to see, and they have no way of getting the truth because there's so much falsehood out there.
And just again, to strengthen what you're saying and to show you how the situation is even worse than how you're explaining it, I'm going back to the post-Trump purge again after the Trump won the election in 2016. And again, I was very much on top of this. I was talking about this because, again, we were being hit. We just experienced it. Our business was being destroyed. So Google at the time, again, Google owns YouTube. They were putting out new directives, the new rules, how they were going to fight fake news. And I don't have the paperwork anymore, but I remember I used to have it saved, the actual press releases from Google and YouTube saying how from now on they were going to curate search results in order to ensure that when people search for certain videos or certain information on Google, right, either on YouTube or Google, people would be fed the correct, right, true information and not be able to find the videos or search results on Google that give the alternative information that Google has decided is not true. So this was already, again, back.
The Social Dilemma documentary actually points this out. It does it from a business perspective. And it says that if you type into Google, for example, climate change is, so for some segments of the population, it will say that it's something that's real and something that's good. And other people will say it's something that's fake and it's false. And depending on who you are, it's going to give you different facts, which is just unbelievable.
So their testimony must have been before the Trump election of 2016, because after that, they were basically saying they will not allow the search results of videos or text results saying that climate change is not real to come up. I mean, unless you go like through 2, 3, 4, 5 pages down, but who does that anymore? You go to the first page. So the first page is basically going to have all the information that Google believes is true to give to you. I mean, again, you had people, again, this is post 2016, when Congress or Senate were investigating potential election interference by Google and Facebook. And I remember seeing the testimony of some guy. He said, listen, I voted for Hillary Clinton. I don't have a horse in this race, but look what Google did to the search results before the election. all of the information that had to do with things that would have made Hillary Clinton look bad. If you typed in Hillary Clinton it was all positive stuff. It wouldn't give you the results of her scratching the servers and destroying all of her emails. So this was a Hillary Clinton voter, but a professional, thank God, in his testimony saying how they and he was saying like millions and tens of millions of votes were swayed even in 2016 because of how Facebook and Google were manipulating their algorithms to ensure that people would only be fed certain information. And this is before the elections. And even with them doing that, Trump still won. And they were saying, oh, my God, we didn't do enough, basically. We have to do more to shut down the voices that we don't. So, but
if I may, when Amy Coney Barrett was going through the hearings to see if she would be accepted, they were talking about she was a devout, confirmed, when she was a devout Christian. So the Democrats, the left wing, they were very concerned about her personal views entering into her judgments. And they were asking her about same-sex marriages and stuff like that. And she used the expression sexual preference. And within 1 hour, all of the online dictionaries changed the definition of that term to have negative connotations. Wow. Meaning sexual preference used to be a very bland, non-denominational term that was non-judgmental. And as soon as she used it, it became, and I remember when Donald Trump mentioned that they were investigating ultraviolet light to be used against the coronavirus. My editor, David Sidman, he said to me, well, I want you to write about that. He said, there's a company that's doing that. I'm like, oh, that's interesting. So I started writing the article, but I couldn't find the company.
They hid it?
They hid it. There was a company, they actually had a product. It was like a catheter, but it was inserted. It used ultraviolet light to sanitize the lower intestine. So it went in from the bottom and got rid of any of used the ultraviolet light to sanitize it, to heal and get rid of the disease from the lower intestine. So they said, you know something? It's good against viruses. Let's use it to intubate from the throat into the lungs. It'll go into the lungs and kill all the virus in the lungs. The minute that Donald Trump said, we might be checking out ultraviolet, that company disappeared from the internet.
Wow.
And I was just like, we're talking about people's lives here. The whole hydroxychloroquine thing also. These are things that should not be politicized. And even worse, as you said, they're changing the truth. It's a false belief. There's no way you could believe that this stone created the world, but now you can. There's no way you can believe this stuff, but now you can. I mean, Joe Biden, he's been in the public spotlight for a long time, and they made up an entire backstory. Everyone knows that the Jews were in Israel. That all of human history. We've known that the Jews were in Israel. They're rewriting it. They rewrote it, and people buy it. And it becomes, not only that, it becomes the absolute necessary language that has to be used. Occupied territories. It's not occupied territories. Never has been.
People who do not know, the power of the left is language, is their manipulation of language. Pro-choice. So who doesn't want to be pro-choice? So just by the words that they use, they're able to manipulate people to people's opinions and change their values because of Black Lives Matter. Well, of course Black Lives Matter. Of course I'm going to support I'm against Black Lives Matter. Folks,
but
Black Lives Matter is not about Black lives. But they are manipulating language to make people support something that, in essence, if they knew what it was really about, they wouldn't support. So many people who wouldn't necessarily support abortion, but how can you be against pro-choice? All of a sudden, people are coerced to then believe, I must support this as well, even though it doesn't necessarily go according.
That's the power of the snake. The snake in the Garden of Eden, he had no arms, no legs. Well, maybe he did back then. The only thing he could use to do anything was the power of his tongue, the power
Right.
of his speech.
Right.
And snake in Hebrew is nachash, which means to guess. Linachesh means to guess. You got doubt. And as we know, Amalek, the eternal enemy of Israel, is the same gematria, the same numerology as safek, as doubt. They get you to doubt your own, what you know is the truth. What you know is the truth. And that's how they win. You have to know the truth. We know the truth. And Avi, I hate to say this, but the minute you started speaking about the truth about Israel, you put a target on your back. I'm sorry, because those are you are the guy. You know, they may not like Trump, they might, but the guy they're really shooting for is you, sitting here in the promised land, speaking the truth about Israel. They are going to come for you with all the guns blazing. And any of our listeners who join us and who want to be part of blessing Israel, I'll tell you, you get two targets. You get one target that these guys are going to shoot at, but Avi, you are so blessed. You're awesome. You're a Jew living in the land of Israel. You have so many blessings in your life. God willing, you'll have so many more. And our listeners also, you're joining the side that's going to be catching all of the fire. Okay, we are all, if you're listening to us, you're the person that they want to get rid of because you're saying the truth. Israel, God promised it to the Jews, and I'm with the Jews. So on one hand, you know, you're speaking the truth, you're going to catch fire. You're going to catch, all the bullets are going to be flying in your direction. But on the second target is Hashem is going to be blessing all of us. You know, that's for sure.
Amen.
That's for sure. Yeah.
To go back to the Bible, and again, a message to all your viewers and listeners, and a message of inspiration is that you have chosen the right side by listening to the truth tellers of the Jewish people and the Jewish state of Israel, the third Jewish commonwealth, the modern state of Israel. Because all you have to do is go back to Abraham. You were saying that the evil today, it's idolatry, right? The big tech world, their way of trying to control us all, trying to censor the information that they don't want to get out there, manipulating the values of they want the masses to believe. It's all idolatry. Well, Abraham fought even against his own father, who sold idolatry. The whole world during Abraham's time were idol worshipers. And yet here you had one guy who said, wait a second, this idol worship stuff does not make sense. There's a God out there who is responsible for creating it all. And we have to worship that one and only God and destroy all the idols. Did the masses follow Abraham? Not at all. He got a few people here and there to tag along with him. The masses didn't go along with him. He was a voice of reason, of truth in the minority. So even though, whether me or us or the Jews in the state of Israel, even though we're a minority, and we're always going to be a minority, no matter how big we grow as a people, no matter how big the Jewish state of Israel grows, and it will grow because God told us it would, as more Jews come home, the land of Israel would get bigger. I mean, that's in the Bible. No matter how big we grow, we're still going to be a minority in this world, but we're still going to be the minority voice of reason, of clarity, and of truth because of our connection to God. So anyone out there who listens to us and connects with us and supports us, you have chosen the right side, and your help grow our little minority voice to be that much more powerful and effective.
Yeah, I also think, you know, it's funny. I remember even as a little boy when I went to the synagogue, you know, when they pulled the Torah out of the ark, if anyone's ever merited holding a Torah, it's the most wonderful experience in the world. And when you're sitting and you have a Torah on your lap, it's like having a large child on your lap. It's a physical experience. It's real. When you read the Bible, you come to Israel, you walk around. It's real. You're walking on the land that you read about, and you know it's true. As much as I'm fascinated by the internet and the computer, you turn it off, it's gone. And the next day, you know, you have to find their sites that actually archive the internet because it's gone. They can change it. And what they said was true yesterday, they'll change it today. It's just, there's nothing There's nothing. It's the trick of the dark side is that he goes, ha ha, I've got the truth. Psh, it's gone. And that's what is the cancel culture? The only way that a nothing can stand up against a something is if you get rid of the something. So they're not trying to create anything positive. They're trying to cancel out what's real. And that's what we're fighting about. Avi, I hate to say this, we're way over time, which I kind of knew would happen. When I get together with men like Avi, with people like Avi and Josh, oh my goodness, we're
as long as there are people still watching, it's fine.
As long as there are people still watching, as long as people join us, as long as you guys are with us, they're not going to shut us up. They're not going to shut you up. We're sitting here in Israel, holding on to the truth with all our strength.
Well, thank you so much for having me, guys.
Thank you, Avi. You're the truth teller. I'd like to thank everyone for joining us. This has been really wonderful. By you joining us, I'm able to get together with amazing friends, amazing people. If you bless us, we have to bless you back. That's what's written. That's the rules. That's the way it works. And if you keep coming back, you can keep doing that. Thanks so much. Be blessed, y'all. Have an amazing day.
Take